Hey everybody, it is 9:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to do a Facebook Live, and we're going to be talking about protein and the ready-to-eat meal enhancements that people have been doing. So first of all, really enjoying all the posts that everyone is doing about their meals. That's really great. And it's something that I was hoping would actually happen because I think to make the challenge really effective, you really have to craft the ready-to-eat meals almost as meal starters and not full, complete ready-to-eat meals. Although I do know, as an example myself, that I can eat the pad thai or the tom yum by itself, maybe with a salad also, and that provides me really a whole lot of fullness. So I see we have a couple people watching. So if you are watching, type in where you're from, and to know that I have people watching is always nice. You may hear howling in the background. The wind here in Florida tonight is very loud. So hope it's not interfering with the audio too much, but it's super loud and howling outside. Okay, so as far as hey Cindy, hi Michelle. So okay, so I wanted to talk about the ready-to-eat meal enhancements. First of all, when it comes to that, when I mentioned protein, adding protein, a lot of people are adding too much protein to the meals. And so I wanted to go through why you should be restricting protein in some senses. Now, before I get into that, I wanted to talk about the use of protein for weight loss. And one of the things about weight loss is that it is true that if you swap out simple carbohydrates like sugar and white flour and white potatoes and substitute that with protein, that is a healthier decision to make. But when it comes to long-term health, having a lot of animal protein in your diet is not the best thing. And so what we're trying to go for here is a sustainable, health-promoting diet that will ensure not just weight loss, but also longevity and health. So let's get to the bottom of this protein issue. Essentially, all rich societies have sort of a obsession with animal protein, that somehow we need to get a lot of animal protein. The truth is far from that. The truth is we need very little animal protein, very little. And that's why people who are vegetarians and vegans don't really worry about protein if they're eating whole plant foods and not over-consuming oils and processed foods. But let's get back to animal protein for a minute. We don't need really more than around 20 grams of animal protein a day. In fact, we don't even need that. But if we're going to eat it, we should restrict it to around 20 grams of protein, which means, like the size of a can of sardines is really all the animal protein that you need or that you should be getting on a daily basis. And the reason that excess animal protein is bad for you is because it is associated with increased aging. It's associated with increases in diabetes. It's associated with increases in heart disease. And it's true that you are more satisfied when you have animal protein, because we've sort of been primed for that throughout the years. But you can also learn to live off of a lot less animal protein. And when you do that, you are overall a lot healthier. Now, I'm not even going into some of the other issues of animal protein, which is the fat that's in animal protein. If you're buying that just from the store and it's from these concentrated animal feeding, just your regular store-bought meat, the toxins in the environment get stored in the fat. So when you're eating sort of store-bought meats and such, you're actually getting in the fats a good amount of toxins. But one of the other things that we should discuss is that when you eat a lot of animal protein, it also triggers insulin to go up. So when you are eating a lot of animal protein, when your insulin goes up, you get what's called insulin-like growth factor that's released. And these are growth hormones that, when you're a bodybuilder, they're helpful in growing muscles, but they can also help grow other things like tumors. And that's why when you're eating a lot of animal protein and you're in this chronic state of these growth hormones circulating around your body, you're at an increased risk for cancer. And that's why the more animal protein you eat, higher your risk of certain cancers is. To add to this, there's another issue involved with animal protein, and that is that you don't need that much of it, and anything that is excess actually gets converted into sugar. And this is done through a process called gluconeogenesis, but which is not important for you to know, but to know that fat is not necessary. Fat doesn't ever get converted into sugar. Protein gets converted into sugar when your muscles and your organs don't need any more animal protein, when there's no more need for it, when the turnover of your tissues has been satisfied, it immediately gets put into sugar. So people are eating an enormous amount of protein. It's not going to lead to the blood sugar spikes of, white bread or potato, but in the long run, when you continue to eat at high levels of animal protein, you're actually going to get increased blood sugar. And so we've gone through a whole lot of different things here, and in a second we're going to get into how to add animal protein to your diet in a safe way. But let's review some of the things we discussed. So get increased blood sugar in the long run, that is. You have increased growth hormones in your system that are going to lead to this growth state that is going to lead to higher risk for cancer. You have the fats in the meats that are concentrating pesticides and toxins and all that sort of thing. You have increases in heart disease, and you have increases in the signs of aging when you're eating an enormous amount of animal protein. And I hate to say it, but when we think of moderation, but we don't know really what moderation is, because when it comes to what we think of as moderation and what science thinks of as moderation, those are very, very far apart. So you don't need more. I wouldn't recommend eating more than 20 grams of animal protein per day, which means that if you're going to get into enhancing the ready-to-eat meals, you need to think of animal protein as a flavoring agent. And that's how it was throughout history, really. When meat was always a luxury, and you would never really sit down and have a big Texas ribeye. That's never been a healthy situation. So what amount of animal protein would I say would be good to do as a meal enhancement for the ready-to-eat meals? I would say, and I know I'm probably not going to gain too many fans by saying this, no more than around half of a can of sardines size, that much, basically, this much. Let's say you're making the bolognese and you have ground beef, you're only going to have, this much, half a can of sardines amount put into the meal, which if you look at the posts in the group, we're getting people who are making a lot more protein than that. What would be ideal would be to really beef up on, no pun intended, on the leafy green vegetables. Someone posted earlier today a whole thing of cabbage, a whole thing of cauliflower surrounding the ready-to-eat meal. That's really what we're trying to go for, which is basically a very, very, if you want to include, there's nothing, I don't want to give the impression that I'm trying to convince anyone to become vegetarian or vegan, because you are, you don't need to become a vegetarian or vegan. I think that if you want to include meat, that's totally fine, but no more than half a can of sardines size of ground beef or of chicken into the meal, just as sort of a flavoring agent, and then really go crazy if you can with leafy green vegetables or a salad or something like that. And Michelle, I'm reading what you wrote about your husband, and I know, the thing is we're used to eating lots of animal protein. We're in American society, and this has partly to do with the affluence of our society, that we are, we can get cheap animal protein, and we're so used to having it. Our bodies almost crave it because we're so used to having some portion of animal protein at every meal. But this is completely inconsistent with optimal health and longevity. And if we could just sort of taper that back, but for the purpose of the challenge, which is basically to make it as easy as possible. And I did at the very beginning say that, you can add animal protein to the meal, but I suppose I didn't really think that through completely, because I guess what I have over the years since learning all this stuff have on my own sort of tapered back on animal protein. I think that I didn't realize how much animal protein people would be adding. So again, to make it as simple as possible, if you think of a can of sardines, half of a can of sardine size ground beef or ground chicken or a piece of chicken or, beef or whatever the case may be. Now, when it comes to fish, it is true that fish is a little bit more safe in all of those things that we talked about. In terms of toxins, although that could be debated, in terms of aging, in terms of heart disease, all these things. It's much less with fish, but nonetheless, I would say that if you're going to be adding protein to a ready-to-eat meal, stick to the half can size of sardines for the protein, and then go crazy with the leafy greens, or a salad before or a salad after, or something like that. Now, since we have a couple people on here who are talking about the sugar content in the meals, so if you came into the challenge and you were on some sort of intermittent fasting or cyclic ketosis, where you're cycling in and out of ketosis, then you probably are best just using the plain noodles by themselves. For almost everyone else, I don't think it's going to be an issue, because the calorie counts are, still incredibly low with the ready-to-eat meal, so it's not something that I would worry about. I would be cautious with what you're adding to the meal, but then again, that's what we're talking about during the tonight's Facebook Live. So that's really all the issues that I wanted to go into. So Cindy's asking, can you give us examples of other types of animal protein? Do you mean, are you asking what other types of protein you should be getting protein from, or are you asking like what other types of animal protein? Which is it? Well, I'll answer both. The first is, if you're thinking about your need for protein from animals, so same size really, but basically when it comes to safety, not from animals. Okay, so you don't have to worry about protein. If you're eating a big salad per day and you are having a handful of nuts per day, you're not if you're eating whole plant foods as a majority of your diet, and you're not getting, and a large part of your diet is not coming from white potatoes and processed carbohydrates, you're not going to be protein deficient. It's a myth. That's why vegans who are eating whole plant-based diets are never protein deficient, and it's not something that you need to concern yourself with. So you can certainly get it from nuts and beans and seeds, but the whole plant-based foods have protein in them. A big salad, you're going to get, sometimes if it's a big salad, you can get 15 to 20 grams of protein just in that salad. Broccoli has protein, lettuce has protein, spinach has protein. So if you're eating lots of leafy greens, you're not going to have to worry about protein. So it's one of the biggest myths out there. If you're eating just whole plant-based foods, you're not going to be protein deficient. And you also have to keep in mind that just your own body recycles, your own body recycles protein. So your body creates something like 15 to 20 grams of protein that you sort of redigest and use over and over again. So don't worry about protein deficiency, especially if you're eating whole foods. Terry's basically saying soybeans and beans and tofu are of course sources, but those aren't. Those are good sources. You don't need to eat them, but those are also good sources. And I think someone was asking, now that Terry mentions that, we're also asking about tofu. So I don't recommend huge blocks of tofu, but small portions of tofu are totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. A lot of people like fermented soy products better, like miso and natto, because of something called enzyme inhibitors that are found in tofu. But I think if you're eating just small portions, and in Asia they don't eat big blocks of tofu. In Korean food there are a few dishes where it's like a big bowl of tofu soup, but that's not something that's eaten on a daily basis. In Japan, you may get small little cubes of tofu in miso soup, and maybe a little bit of tofu occasionally, but it's really again, if you're eating small amounts, it's not an issue. And Terry's saying if you start having issues with bruising and cuts not healing, then you need to look at nutrient density, and that's true for sure. If you're eating whole plant-based foods in general, you're not. When you think about nutrient density, you think about calories per serving size, nutrients per calorie. And when you are focused on foods that have a high nutrient density versus the calorie count, then you're not going to have to worry about protein. So white flour obviously is going to have a lot of calories but low nutrient density. But broccoli is going to have low calories and a high nutrient density. So you want to get that ratio right. And then the way you do that is you eat whole unprocessed foods, and you're not going to have to worry about nutrient density. You're not going to have to worry about protein. These are things you don't have to worry about. So I think that covers most of what I wanted to discuss. The best thing you can do is cut back on animal protein, but I do know that as you're trying to lose weight and you have difficulty getting rid of these foods that are processed carbohydrates, in the beginning, it's often easier to put in higher amounts of animal protein. And that's okay for a short period of time to try to get the weight off. But when we're talking about long-term health and longevity, you want to cut your animal protein back. Of course, everyone has different needs, but in generally speaking, unless you're a bodybuilder or you are training for some high intensity muscle development type of activity where you need some more protein, then that's an unusual circumstance, and you may need a little bit more protein. But there are vegan bodybuilders out there, and there are vegan football players. So they've been able to do it, although those people generally use some sort of vegan protein powder. So we're not focused, right now we're focused on, I don't want to get too far off track, but we're focused on the normal average person who's not a athletic competitor, a high-level athletic competitor. And in that case, if you're just eating whole plant-based foods, do not worry about protein. Especially if you're eating that big salad that I recommend per day, you're not going to have to worry about it. So it is 9:50, and I think I'm going to sign off soon. If anyone has any further questions about that, please let me know or post in the comments below. And she tried start going in and out there. Terry mentioned that everyone is different. I tried vegan, doesn't work for me. I needs to meat. For others, it's not an issue. Yeah, again, I'm not talking or trying to convince anyone to be vegan. Not at all. In fact, I think that not only can you eat meat in a, generally speaking, there are ways of eating meat ethically, I believe, but also, small portions of animal protein, like I've discussed, I think probably have some benefit. And there is no need for anyone watching to go vegan. But the amount of animal protein that the average person, the average American thinks is sort of moderation is scientifically not moderation. It's actually excessive. So for those people like Terry who tried vegan and it didn't work and feel better with a little bit of meat, then I think the guideline of around 20 grams a day to get that animal protein in that may help you in some way is sort of a good guideline, but also focusing on those other things that we always discuss, which is the handful of nuts per day, minimizing the oils which do not have, which are very nutrient poor but calorie dense, getting that big salad per day, and then as far as the ready to eat meal go, focus on leafy greens and veggies, and using the meat as a flavor enhancer. Just a little bit is all you need, and you start appreciating the flavor and the texture that animal protein can provide, but doing it in a way that's consistent with what we know about science. And science is very clear that people who eat a lot of animal protein do not live as long, have increased aging and increased risk for cancer and heart disease. And so that's what I wanted to discuss tonight. I am enjoying the interaction in the group. It's much more than I ever anticipated. I'm learning a lot about the ready meals that I created because we're getting a lot of good feedback. I've gotten a lot of personal, instant Facebook Messenger comments that people have, and their husbands have lost weight already in the last week. And of course, Julian is now posting, some really great content on how to use the meal kit, and it's such an amazing tool. And it sort of backs up some of the things that we've been speaking about in the Weight Loss Awakening group, such as being careful with those oils, and being able to assess portion sizes, and talking about leafy greens and a whole host of other things. So it's the perfect mix of things that we're seeing. And again, I'm learning a lot about the ready meals, and it's so interesting to see how you are customizing them. That is really cool. And I'm amazed that everyone's posting their meals. Keep it up. I don't even remember asking people to do that, but everybody, a lot of people are, and that I think gives a lot of strength to other people to really get in there and make those meals their own, so that they're as tasty as possible. Because obviously, we all want to be on a eating plan that we enjoy and is customized to us. And the fact that you're using those meals as sort of like a meal starter, in a sense, is really cool for me to see. So yeah, so that's it. So appreciate all 6 of you who are watching live, and I'm sure as there is further comment and discussion in the group, then we'll know, we'll know further topics that we can go into. Patty's saying, got rid of the cheese. Now to reduce my animal protein is next. Can spend the extra money on my veggies. Yeah, it's true. I as far as cheese goes, that also is it potently raises insulin levels, which again creates that milieu in your body of increased growth hormone, which can cause other things to grow that you don't want to grow, in addition to obviously the toxins that can be in cheese and the addictive qualities of cheese. Again, I'm not telling you to get rid of cheese completely. In fact, I'm not telling you to get rid of anything necessarily, but I want you to be fully informed about that. So Cindy's asking about limiting fruit intake. So I'll leave that to Julian. You can definitely eat too much fruit, but if you stick with berries, I recommend, there's a lot I recommend for you to add, but if you're eating a lot of blueberries, which Terry is commenting on here, they have a lot of fiber in them. All those berries have a lot of fiber, and they don't make your blood sugar, for the overwhelming majority of people, if you're eating a handful of berries, you are not going to get any blood sugar elevation at all, and it's not something that I would worry about, unless you are on some sort of ketogenic diet or you're going through cycles of in and out of ketosis for whatever type of plan you're on. But Terry's commenting about apples, berries, and pears. And again, yeah, exactly, you're getting the pectin fiber in the apples and the pears. And so I wouldn't worry about that, but I wouldn't eat more than a handful of berries at a time. But you could have a couple of those throughout the day. Of course, they count as a carbohydrate. So in the context of portion control, Julian will go through that because fruits fall into the carbohydrate category. So Patty's saying blackberries are very doable with keto. So very good to know. And Joanna's saying blueberries and or raspberries are great in red wine. So that's interesting. Keep in mind that that wine, I gave that lecture a little while ago about wine. And if you're going to have wine, you count that as your carbohydrate by itself for perfect portion control. But yes, but blueberries and raspberries, I'm sure, do grow great in red wine. That's funny. So yeah, and obviously, as Patty's saying, blackberries are very doable with keto and intermittent fasting because you can pay attention to the amount of carbs you're getting there, and you can get a decent quantity of berries. And they don't have a whole lot of carbohydrates and sugar in them. So so berries definitely are great, and they are good for you in so many ways. So yeah, any other questions before I sign off? Thanks for all the great comments and the cooperation and the comments. Awesome. Okay. So Terry's making a very good point, and we're going to actually talk a little bit more about this, but she said bananas, when they're greenish, have a lot of resistant starch in them, and they are very good for you when they're greenish. And we're going to talk about green banana flour with a woman that I met who's actually the world's expert in resistant starch, and she's an expert in green banana flour as an amazing thing to use for helping with blood sugar issues and satiety, feeling full, and affecting how hungry you get and that sort of thing. So I'll be interviewing her in the Weight Loss Awakening group. I think everyone here is in the Weight Loss Awakening group. So that's good. So thank you, Terry, for mentioning that about the green bananas. Yeah, they're very, very green banana flour or green bananas are very good for you. And if you blend them in a smoothie or whatever, as if they're a little bit underripe, again, you're getting a lot of good resistant starch. So yeah, all right. So I will. Thanks, Patty, for that. I will trying to get the timing right on the resistant starch expert. She's just like an incredible wealth of knowledge. And what was amazing about that was I made a video on resistant starch, and I think I may have mentioned this in the other video, but she wrote me a comment about that. She saw it and she corrected me, and she was concerned that I would take that in a negative way. But of course, I'm happy to learn from the world's expert in resistant starch. So that was really exciting. And we got on the phone and we spoke for like an hour. I mean, it was really remarkable to learn about resistant starch. And I think that you're going to see this becoming a more important part of using these sorts of things to moderate your hunger and your blood sugar. And there are all kinds of studies that have been done on resistant starch. So that's really cool. And so anyway, we've gotten a little off track, and I appreciate the comments. Wish everyone a good evening, and I hope to get on again in a couple nights before the holiday weekend. And I'll see you in the forum, in the group, and look forward to seeing some more posts of your awesome dishes so that I can try them myself. And I'll talk to you guys real soon. Thanks a lot. Okay, bye-bye. You're welcome. Bye-bye.